Hello everyone, investment scams rampant. Please vigilant and discerning. Do not trust information from unknown sources. Please make sure recognize two official Capital Securities community, Facebook, Capital Securities, YouTube, Capital Wealth Insights.
Hello everyone, welcome to Chuani Good Night. Today is Tuesday, October 28th. I'm analyst Jiang Jida. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you have investment questions, leave me a message. If I can't answer today, I'll address them in tomorrow's class. As usual, I'll also answer questions from students asked yesterday. Good evening, everyone. Just now, we saw this. Your account names, or chat names, are still just a bunch of numbers, so I can't really tell who's who. But a few of you mentioned your names, so I have a rough idea. For example, Shi, good evening to you, and also to Hui Huan Huan, and then there's Mimi 128. Each bag of Zewin and KDK is enough, right? Also, good evening, and Alice Fool. And who is this? Who is this? Right, they said, hey, good night, and good evening to the staff. I don't know why the good night setting turns into this, I really don't know. I'll ask later why some people say that during the morning call, it shows the original name, but for some reason, during the good night session, it shows up as a string of Google Gmail account numbers. Honestly, I have no idea why it's like this. Anyway, I'll try my best to recognize everyone, but if I can't, please try to note your name somewhere in your profile. So that if I call on you, you'll know it's you. Anyway, regardless, there's been a ton of economic data and international events in the past couple of days, really a lot, and it's all pretty complicated. I hope everyone can manage their positions as best as possible and make good adjustments. If you're not sure what to do, just check out our Boss Fans morning call in the group in the morning, and in the evening, listen to the group Good Night for all the important things you need to know before the US stock market opens. That's enough, okay. Alright, first let's take a look at today's investment focus, the 8 key points of the Xi-Biden talks. Does China still have any trump cards? The Xi-Biden meeting is about to take place. Then, looking ahead to the APEC summit on October 31st, it's also coming up soon. Before it kicks off, we can already see people like Burns, Treasury Secretary Bessent, or Secretary of State Rubio, and so on. They're all doing some preparatory work. Now, everyone should pay a bit of attention. Before the meeting starts, there are a few key points to note. The entire Xi-Biden meeting will revolve around 8 main focal points. If you can catch these 8 main points, you'll pretty much have an 80 to 90% idea of which direction the talks will go. Let me give you the conclusion first. Overall, it should move in a positive direction. Yes, overall it will head in a positive direction. However, whether there will be any concrete conclusions on these 8 key points, I think it won't happen quickly. Let me repeat, things will move positively, but reaching agreements on the 8 key points, the main areas of coordination, won't be fast. As for those 8 points, I'll tell you about them soon. Also, China still has a trump card. What is it? During the trade war, China's main move was the so-called rare earth card, meaning export controls on rare earths. That way, the US and other countries would feel the pinch. But besides rare earths, does China have any other trump cards it can use? Of course it does, but this particular trump card is something China would rather not play, because if they did, it would have a huge impact on the everyday lives of Americans. So, I'll tell you more about what this other trump card is in just a bit. Alright, now as for the industrial side of things, will Musk's trillion-dollar dream actually come true? Why do I say that? Because earlier this year, in early September, Tesla's board of directors proposed a $1 trillion compensation package for Musk. So, as we approach November 16th, and with the Tesla shareholders meeting set to take place on October 6th, there have been a lot of related news reports before the 6th. As for this $1 trillion compensation package, Musk said that if it passes, it will definitely give a significant boost to his shareholding, and it will also strengthen his motivation to stay at Tesla. What exactly does this proposal include? If it passes, what kind of impact will it have on Tesla's stock price or on Musk himself? We'll explain all of that to you as well. In addition, when it comes to AI stocks and the AI industry, AMD and Qualcomm are both being very aggressive and strong. So AMD's biggest competitor is, of course, NVIDIA. Qualcomm's main expertise lies in communication chips, especially those for smartphones. So why are these two major companies gradually trying to encroach on and seize the AI market? What exactly does this move to capture the market involve? If you currently hold stocks in AMD, or even NVIDIA, or Qualcomm, what actions should you be taking now? Tonight, we'll go over all of this with you in detail. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, who is this? Good evening. And Melissa, hello. Emily, hi, Emily, good evening, good evening. Emily, your username with those numbers, 020203, is always interesting to see. When you all pick, like your email or account names, do you ever think about it? Sometimes, the numbers at the end of a name are usually your birthday, right? So I'm not sure if my guess is correct. Amy Link might be 0203, maybe that means she's an Aquarius. And just now, May was 0128, which could also be Aquarius, 0128, something like that. But then there's someone with the username, goodevening35858, that probably isn't a birthday, maybe it's a phone number. Oh, that's basically what I mean. So sometimes, you can more or less pick up on a few little clues from someone's account name. Anyway, let's keep going and look at the next part, the investment focus. Let's go over the data together. Tonight, around 9 and 10 p.m., there are a few data releases. The first one is the US FHFA House Price Index for August, which will be announced at 9 p.m. Both the forecast and the previous value are negative 0.1%. This data is actually pretty neutral and is more related to real estate. In addition, the Case-Shiller 20 City Home Price Year-over-Year Index is similar. The previous value was 1.82%, and the forecast is 1.3%. This will also be released at 9 p.m. Both of these data points are closely related to real estate. However, their impact on the volatility of the U.S. stock market is relatively neutral. Also, the U.S. Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index for October will be released at 10 p.m. The previous value was 94.2, and the forecast is 93.4. Also, at 10 o'clock, there's a data release called the Richmond Fed Manufacturing Index for October. The previous value was -17, and the forecast is -12. This data is more of a central survey, so overall, tonight there will be a series of data releases from 9 to 10 o'clock. In my opinion, at most, you just need to keep an eye on the Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index. Just see whether overall consumer confidence is leaning positive or negative. Right now, it looks like it will be a little lower than the previous value by about 1 point. But honestly, I don't think this will have much impact on the US stock market. The truly significant and important data, I believe, will be Thursday's so-called Federal Reserve interest rate decision. In addition, both Japan and the European Central Bank will also hold their rate decisions on the same day. Then, on Friday, if we look at this Friday. As for the government, if the US government shutdown doesn't affect Friday's data, then in theory, Friday's economic data will also be very important. We're talking about the PCE or core PCE data, which is actually the economic indicator that the Federal Reserve pays more attention to. So, that's a quick update for everyone on the main data to watch tonight. Let me answer a student question. Who was it? Who asked yesterday? Liao Yussi, not sure if Yussi is online today. Director Yussi asked about gold. Gold recently hit a record high, above $4,381. It set a new record, but now seems to be dropping, falling below the 10-day and then the monthly moving averages. It's dropped to around $3,900, almost breaking below $4,000. He asked whether such a significant pullback, from $4,400 down to $3,900, is just a correction after a big rally, a consolidation and adjustment, or if it's actually turning into a real long-term bearish correction. Let me tell you, the overall long-term bullish structure for gold hasn't changed at the moment. It's still a long-term bullish trend, because it's actually pretty simple. If you look at how it has risen all the way from 15 or 1600 up to over 4,000 now, it's definitely still a long-term bullish setup. So if you look at it from a long-term perspective, the long-term bullish trend for gold hasn't changed, and the price hasn't changed either. But you need to pay special attention, because most people usually don't play the long game. Most people tend to do some spread trading or price difference investing. Maybe they're more focused on the short term. What you need to pay attention to is that, in the short term, there is currently pressure for a pullback. Why is there short-term pullback pressure? Because too many bullish factors have already been released, and as we get closer to the end of October, the probability of a Fed rate cut increases. Plus, there's a chance the Fed might do a second rate cut in December. So generally speaking, when there's a rate cut, it tends to make the US dollar fall. When the dollar falls due to a rate cut, what happens to gold prices? They move in the opposite direction. When the dollar falls, gold prices rise. When the dollar rises, gold prices fall. So a rate cut is favorable for gold prices to go up. But as the market becomes more and more certain that there will be a rate cut in October, and possibly another one in December, what happens then? As we get closer and closer to the actual day of the rate cut, gold's volatility might increase, and we could even see what's called by the rumor, sell the news effect. So in the short term, I think there's quite a bit of pressure for a pullback. If you're planning to make a move in the short term, it's better to pause and observe for now, because after all, from mid-August this year, gold has been rising all the way, following this blue line. The blue line is the 10-day moving average, and it kept climbing higher and higher along this 10-day line. But you'll notice that after October 15th, this 10-day moving average was broken, and even the 20-day moving average, the monthly line, was also broken. So if it continues to correct downward, the pressure from this correction will gradually move closer to the 50-day moving average. So in the short term, there's really no need to chase after it or make any aggressive moves. Wait until it stabilizes and stops falling before looking for a new buying opportunity, or take a safer approach. Okay, that's for the short term. Now, speaking of gold, with the price now reaching around $4,000, I don't know if any of you have a lot of gold jewelry on hand from back then. Now, seeing gold priced above $4,000, I always feel a bit heartbroken. Why heartbroken? Because thinking back to about 3 or 4 years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago. Back then at home, you know, sometimes parents would keep some gold, maybe some jewelry or ornaments that they didn't use. I guess it was from when they got married or something, but they didn't really use it. I remember the price of gold at that time was. It was about $1,400. It already felt high back then, 3 or 4 years ago. At that time, gold was $1,400 per ounce. If you converted that to the kind of gold shops you see in Taiwan, it would be about 1,000 Taiwan dollars per tael, or maybe per mace. Anyway, it was about 4,000 new Taiwan dollars, roughly 4,000 NT dollars. At that time, when 1 ounce was exchanged for 4,000 NT dollars, it seemed pretty good, like quite a lot. But I never expected that after 3 or 4 years, it would go from 1,400 to over $4,000. I remember if you convert it to new Taiwan dollars, it seems like it went up to at least over 10,000, from 4,000 to over 10,000. So things like this are really hard to predict. So whether gold is better for short-term or long-term investment really depends on the individual. For those who have gold jewelry at home, do you want to keep holding on to it, or do you want to sell it? It depends on your financial planning. If you're just profiting from price swings, watch the 10-day moving average. If the price drops below it, be more conservative short-term. When it rises above the monthly moving average, there may be a short-term trend where the price stabilizes or stops falling. Alright, good night. Let me check, what is it that I sent? I sent, 35,555,858, August 8th, born at 8 o'clock. Who is this? 888, so you picked 888 because you were born on August 8th at 8 o'clock? Seriously? That's a pretty good number, all the way 8s, all the way 8s. Alright, okay, my house got robbed, all the gold was stolen. Oh man, well, let's try to look at it another way. Of course, having your house robbed is really upsetting and makes you angry, but to some extent, if the thief stole it, say, 3 or 4 years ago like in my case, and you turned that gold into cash back then, at least he exchanged it at a lower price, because a thief isn't going to wait 3 years after stealing the money to cash it in, right? Usually, that's not the case, he'll cash it in the next day. So, in a way, he also made less profit, but of course, it's best if your house never gets robbed at all, that's a huge hassle. Anyway, to sum up, as for the daily gold chart, I hope this information helps answer your question online. Alright, and of course, the most important thing is, you have to put it in a safe, Speaking of putting things in a safe, this is getting a bit off topic. The thing about safes is, sometimes they're actually kind of tricky. If you didn't have a safe at home to begin with, that's one thing. But if you do have a safe at home, what happens if, say, some bad apples or thieves come? What do? They see the safe. When they see the safe, they know there are valuables inside, so all they have to do is steal the safe. So, is it actually better to have a safe or not? Sometimes it really becomes a kind of paradoxical problem. For me, things like bankbooks, stamps, or cash, I usually spread them out in different places around the house. I put a little here and there. If you do it like that, you probably won't forget where things are. I have a safe at home, but if you put everything in it, it's like telling everyone your most valuable things are inside. So I keep a little in different places. That's how I do it. Alright, let's take a look. This has all been stolen, okay. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Secretary of State Rubio had a phone call. Of course, the call was to prepare for the upcoming Trump-Xi meeting at the end of October, with both high-level officials getting ready. So, what did both sides do? They agreed to further confirm and work out some details, and to go through all sorts of approval procedures in their respective countries, and so on. Then, Treasury Secretary Vicente said that Trump has already removed the threat of imposing an additional 100% tariff on China in November. So, this is actually... How should I put this? Basically, before the Trump-Xi meeting, anyway, isn't October 31st the day when the two leaders are supposed to meet? There will be some preparatory work before the meeting. If all the preparations go well, if everything looks good, then basically, on October 31st, everyone will be happy. So, as of now, since it's only October 31st and there are only 3 or 4 days left, the current expectation is that things will develop in a positive direction. Now, in these few days, between October 27th and 29th, Trump is visiting Japan. It's expected that, today, I met with, what's-her-name, Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi of Japan, and after the 29th, the plan is to fly to Korea. Why go to Korea? It's to attend an APEC meeting. So, what about APEC? After the 29th, on October 31st, the leaders of both sides will meet. So, the preparatory work is gradually being laid out, and I think at the very least, it's paving the way in a positive direction. Alright, at the very least, things are moving in a positive direction. Now, coming back, I want to talk to everyone about why I mentioned earlier that investors should pay attention to the 8 key points of the 2 rounds of negotiations between China and the US. So, these 8 key points have basically been summarized by Bloomberg, right? Bloomberg's news has compiled these 8 items, and I think they're quite worth referencing. Now, I believe that the Xi-Trump meeting should develop in a positive direction, that's for sure. However, not all of these 8 items will necessarily be settled in this round of talks. For example, the first one is about rare earths. Whether there will be a breakthrough on rare earths or whether it will be postponed, I think it will probably be postponed. It will be postponed, but if you ask whether, after half a year or a year, China will use this as an opportunity, as a bargaining chip in the end, the answer is definitely yes. Because right now, the whole world, especially the United States, relies on China's rare earths. So, this rare earth negotiation won't be resolved so quickly. How can this be resolved? Unless the United States comes up with corresponding conditions to use as bargaining chips for an exchange. So what are those corresponding chips? That brings us to the second point, export controls on semiconductors, including semiconductor chips and equipment. This is all because China needs advanced technology to develop its own AI or high-tech sectors. So China needs these machines and chips, but the US needs these rare earths. So in other words, if the US wants China to allow rare earth exports without restrictions, then when it comes to American semiconductor chips, there also has to be some level of concession, not imposing strict preconditions. I think these 2 issues are like the 2 ends of a seesaw. In this Trump-Xi meeting, I believe these 2 topics will be discussed at length, and it won't be a situation where, all of a sudden, China fully opens up rare earth exports and the US completely lifts semiconductor controls. I don't think that will happen, because each side has its own plans. If Trump gets access to rare earths, once he has them, he might use them to develop a lot of high-tech industries and strengthen US national defense. At the same time, he's also worried that China's high-tech development could surpass the US. So how to strike a balance here? I don't think it will be resolved that quickly. That's the first point. The second issue is fentanyl. I think the fentanyl and drug problem is relatively easier to negotiate. It's basically about whether China is willing to cooperate with the US on banning drugs, drug control, or cracking down on these things. I think this is pretty straightforward, since it mainly falls under public security and crime. It just needs to be handled properly, so the fentanyl issue should see more progress at this Trump-Xi meeting. As for the direction of progress, what about the sale of TikTok? TikTok is also considered a bargaining chip, just like an extra bargaining chip outside of the original trade war. As for TikTok, the current negotiations have basically made it almost certain that control over TikTok's operations in the US will be handed over to American companies like Oracle and some others. There are also some private equity firms involved, working together on this, including privacy, technology, and certain information controls. This control is being handed over to the US, so I think the TikTok issue is pretty much settled now and shouldn't be too difficult anymore. Alright, about port fees, that's straightforward. The port fee issue began in early November, actually, early October. At that time, Trump suddenly, before any meeting started, announced, "I want to impose a 100% tariff on certain Chinese products," because the mainland was saying they wanted to. They wanted to impose controls on rare earths, and on that very day, Trump was also unhappy. He said, "Fine, then I'm going to target all ships of Chinese nationality, any vessel, no matter how it's made, whether it's a land port or whatever, as long as it's registered in China or related to China, all of them will be charged an extra port fee." On the same day, of course, China also imposed additional port management fees on American vessels. So this issue was actually easy to resolve. They just cancelled it, since the impact wasn't significant. The fees themselves didn't have much effect, so when both sides agreed to remove them, they just did. That can be handled too. Now, for things like soybean trade and reciprocal tariffs, what about those? For reciprocal tariffs, before, each side imposed tariffs, like one side at 155%, the other at 125%, and so on. Both sides had tariffs over 100%. These tariffs have been extended repeatedly, from February, April, up to now, currently until November 10th. Each time, they extend it by 90 days, then another 90 days. So, for November 10th, will these tariffs be imposed? I don't think so, because if they are, stocks will drop again. If the market falls, Trump doesn't want that, and Xi Jinping doesn't either. So, about these tariffs and the November 10th talks, I don't think they'll go through. They'll keep postponing it, just dragging it out, and in the end, what happens? They'll drag it out until everyone's happy. As for reciprocal tariffs, I don't think China will impose them yet, they'll keep postponing it, so this is pretty easy to handle. If they want to delay, they'll push it to November 10th, then delay another 30 or even 90 days. What are the conditions? The condition is that China has to import more American soybeans, US soybeans. So, can this be achieved? I don't think it's that hard to achieve, it's just a matter of reciprocal tariffs, basically a trade-off of conditions. The reciprocal tariffs set for November 10th, I'll just keep postponing them. And what else? For soybean trade, I'll import more soybeans from you, so that should settle things. For the last issue, the Russia-Ukraine war, we probably don't need to pay much attention. The war is basically Russia, Ukraine, and the US negotiating now. That's it. Now, as for China. Is there any way for China to influence or restrain Russia? Whether it's about crude oil, weapons, or even China's position on Ukraine. Is there a way for China to have a big impact? I think they probably don't intend to intervene much. So when the US and China talk about the Russia-Ukraine war and what role China plays, I think China is still taking a relatively neutral stance. If China were to really oppose Russia, that would basically mean falling out with Russia, and I don't think they'd be that foolish. So regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, I think it's still a stalemate, and that's probably for the best. As for these 8 points, after looking them over, I think about 1/3 will get passed or have a conclusion, but the other 2/3 are still up for negotiation. But at least 1/3 will be discussed and at least 1/3 will be addressed, which is a good thing. It means things are moving in a positive direction. So, regarding these 8 key points raised by Bloomberg, we've just done a pretty in-depth analysis for everyone. So please pay a bit of attention. The restrictions on rare earths and semiconductors are basically entangled with each other. The sale of TikTok and port fees are easier to resolve. For soybean trade and tariffs, that's also a seesaw logic. On the Russia-Ukraine war, China will likely stay neutral. I just wanted to add a bit more on these points for everyone. Alright, someone mentioned the Louvre in Paris. Hey, good evening. This Happy Go 928. Who is Happy Go 928? Are you a staff member or someone else, or did I just forget? Okay, good evening Louis Yang. The Louvre in Paris, the Louvre, about that theft at the Louvre, I think that was pretty ridiculous too. It's hard to imagine how at the Louvre, someone could just drive up in a maintenance vehicle, use a lift to go up, cut the glass, and then steal things. Sometimes it's just baffling. When things are being stolen, didn't the alarm go off? Or was there no staff on site? It seemed like there wasn't anyone there either. Everyone just assumed they were staff, you know? So, when it comes to security, this really raises a lot of questions and concerns. So, I really can't imagine if one day the Louvre or maybe some museum in Egypt, or some other museum, got robbed. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. It's just that we've had peace and prosperity for so long, and when things are peaceful for too long, people lose their sense of crisis. So when something suddenly goes missing or gets stolen, you just think, how could that happen? About the whole Louvre thing in Paris, I think it's pretty ridiculous. As for whether China has other trump cards, besides rare earths, which is one of them, there's also this. According to the United States Pharmacopoeia, in the US there are about 677 or 679 types of active pharmaceutical ingredients, making up about 37% of the total. At the very least, all these active pharmaceutical ingredients rely on some key starting materials from China. In other words, to produce these raw pharmaceutical ingredients, they have to depend on certain crucial things from China for them to be effective. That's basically the idea. Among them, there are 211 core raw materials that are exclusively controlled by China. In other words, if today the US has about 700 important active pharmaceutical ingredients, and if China says, I'm not selling you the key core materials, then these 700 ingredients can't be produced or simply can't be made. So what would that affect? It would impact the US healthcare industry and the daily lives of Americans. And this kind of impact is on a certain level, but that level goes even deeper. It's not just a simple matter. Today, if you don't get rare earths, then maybe without those rare earths, you can't make high-tech products like chips. If you don't have it, you can't make things like national defense missiles, you can't make permanent magnet motors, and you can't develop electric vehicles. At most, that's the situation. But it won't starve people. It won't cause a threat to human life or safety, right? If you don't drive an electric car, it's not a big deal. If you're missing a missile, that's not the end of the world either. That's just how it is. But when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it's a whole different story. Medicines can be a huge problem because they actually affect people's lives, safety, property, and health. So if China really controls the key raw materials for pharmaceuticals, to control things in response to the previous US trade war, then I think the consequences would be much more serious. That would be a much bigger deal, and it could even affect US public opinion polls, including Trump's approval ratings. But so far, China hasn't played this Trump card yet. China hasn't used this ace up its sleeve. But just so everyone is aware, there are nearly 700 types of medicines, while nearly 700 key raw materials that rely on China. So this issue could be big or small, but just keep it in mind. I don't think China will actually use this as a bargaining chip, because using it in a trade war would be a bit too ruthless. I don't think China would go that far. But when it comes to rare earths, I think that's a more straightforward issue. It's just a matter of negotiation between both sides. So, this is just for everyone's understanding. There's also another trump card, which is the issue of pharmaceutical raw materials. Okay, and as for the Public Security Bureau's part, it's already dropped below 4%. Overall, everyone is expecting that there might be a rate cut at the end of October, and there's also a chance for another rate cut in mid-December. The 10-year Public Security Bureau rate has dropped to 3.98%, and the terminal rate is now 3.6%. About 1.9 rate cuts remain before year-end, so roughly 2 more. These could happen this Friday and in December, with room for a quarter-point cut each time. The US dollar index dipped 0.12% today, staying near the 50-day moving average, still showing a choppy rebound. The market is consolidating and fluctuating between bulls and bears. For now, nothing has changed. As for geopolitical risks, let me quickly update everyone on oil prices and OPEC+. OPEC+, this organization, basically refers to OPEC plus the group of non-OPEC countries. The OPEC group includes countries you might expect, like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and so on. The non-OPEC countries are also significant. Russia, for example, is part of the non-OPEC group. So, globally, what exactly is OPEC? OPEC what? In Chinese, it's called the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. When you combine OPEC with the non-OPEC group, together they're called OPEC+, basically, OPEC+. So when you add them together, it's called the OPEC+ group. So, OPEC+ consists of 13 member countries plus 9 non-member countries, making a total of 22 countries. Together, they account for over 50% of the world's crude oil supply. So what does that mean? It means that whenever these countries are negotiating or making statements, you need to understand that they have a huge impact on the supply and price of crude oil, since they control more than half of it. It's said that at this week's meeting, OPEC+ might decide to continue increasing production into December to capture more of the market. As for market share, it's estimated that in December, they might further increase production by 137,000 barrels. Of course, this is still under discussion, but the fact that they're considering increasing production means that the supply of crude oil will go up. When the supply of crude oil increases, and remember, prices are always about supply and demand, so when supply goes up, if demand doesn't keep up right now, and supply keeps increasing, then of course, if demand can't catch up, crude oil prices will easily come under pressure. So you can see that today, crude oil prices continue to fall by 0.51%, staying below the 50-day moving average and remaining heavily suppressed. So at the moment, crude oil is still on a downward trend. There's really only one good thing about crude oil continuing to fall. The drop in crude oil prices is actually something Trump is more than happy to see, because falling crude oil means energy prices are going down. When energy prices drop, the pressure from inflation naturally decreases to some extent and by a certain percentage. So when crude oil falls, inflation also tends to go down. If inflation drops, if it keeps going down, this could help the Fed move more decisively toward cutting rates. Basically, a drop in crude oil prices is good for the Fed's rate-cutting efforts. Just keep that in mind. For economic data, just pay attention to tonight around 9 or 10 o'clock. That's the main thing. Tomorrow's data isn't important, so tomorrow should be fine. Wednesday doesn't have much either. Trump will attend the APEC meeting, as mentioned before. On Thursday, all the red flag data points will be released. Friday is also very important, so keep an eye on Thursday and Friday when the time comes. Besides economic data, major tech companies' earnings reports will also be released on Thursday and Friday. So when the time comes, I'll guide everyone in tracking these and we'll take a look at the industry side of things together. Alright, good night, good night, good night. Hello to everyone joining in. Yes, that's right, Anna, just like that. Yeah, so I heard that 2 people have been caught abroad. 2 suspects have reportedly been apprehended. This must have been reported by someone, otherwise how could they have managed to catch them? Anyway, it's really hard to pull off, but that's how it is. Alright, moving on to earnings reports, the first financial news is about Tesla. We've talked about this trillion-dollar dream. Tesla's board of directors, their chairperson, is completely on Musk's side. The board said that if the trillion-dollar compensation package isn't approved, they might lose Musk, their key figure. So, let's briefly go over this trillion-dollar compensation package. $1 trillion is nearly 31 trillion new Taiwan dollars, an extremely high amount. The shareholders' meeting is expected to vote on this November 6th. What does the package include? Honestly, I think it's hard to achieve, but if it happens, anyone who owns Tesla stock will probably make a fortune. Why? First, as for Musk, when he is expected to receive these shares, he won't be allowed to sell them for 1.5 years. Also, this $1 trillion compensation plan comes with some conditions. The first is that within 10 years, Tesla's EBITDA, that is, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So, what does this mean for net profit and tax rate? The net profit must reach $400 billion. Alright, so what is it now? It's just $16.60 billion. To reach the goal, it needs to grow nearly 20 to 30 times. The market value must hit $8.5 trillion. For context, Tesla's market value is $1.4 trillion. The answer is about $4.4 trillion. Microsoft and Apple are also close to $4 trillion. So, what does within 10 years mean? It means that in 10 years, Tesla's market value would need to reach $8.5 trillion, doubling Nvidia's market value. That's double Nvidia's value, just to give you an idea. Nvidia is at $4.4 trillion. Tesla would need to reach $8.5 trillion. With Tesla's current market cap at $1.4 trillion, reaching $8.5 trillion in 10 years means its stock price would need to grow by at least how much in that time? About 7 times, at least. Right now, Tesla's stock price is about $400. If the number of shares and the float stay the same, for the market cap to reach $8.5 trillion, the stock price would need to rise from $400 up 7 times, over $2,800, almost $3,000. So, in 10 years, if Tesla's stock really hits $2,800 to $3,000, that would be an incredible profit. But if this really happens, that's when Musk would get his $1 trillion compensation. Also, he has to deliver 20 million vehicles, 20 million cars a year, that's a lot. 1 million robots, and FSD, the fully autonomous driving, must have 10 million subscribers. 1 million robotaxis and so on. Basically, there are a ton of requirements. Do you all think there's a chance these can be achieved? Within 10 years, you can also write down your thoughts and see what you think. If Tesla manages to meet all these conditions within 10 years, only then can Musk receive his $1 trillion compensation. Is it reasonable or not? You can think about it and write down your thoughts. As for me, I'm not sure, but I feel like it's probably pretty hard to achieve, really tough, because after all, growing 7 to 8 times over is a bit difficult. But anyway, regardless. This Morgan Stanley analyst, anyway, praised Tesla, saying the FSD and all that is developing really well. And then today, something more interesting happened. This is a highlight. What's interesting today is Trump. Today, while Trump was on Air Force One, I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday, while he was on Air Force One, reporters also asked him about his thoughts on Musk or about their interactions. So today, Trump said that although earlier this year, he and Musk had some disagreements over the big, beautiful act, the tax cut bill, and things got really unpleasant between the two of them, especially around June or July when their argument was all over the news, he still really likes Musk as a person. So, in a way, he's also letting everyone know that he doesn't want to offend the Republican Party's biggest donor. And don't forget, to a certain extent, Trump was able to win the election thanks in large part to Musk's help. In the most recent election, Musk spent at least $290 million to help Trump win, making him by far the biggest donor to the Republican Party. So at this point, Trump being nice to Musk, I think that's a good thing. It's actually pretty positive. Anyway, if Musk wants to earn that $1 trillion compensation, he's going to have to put in a lot of effort into his main business. If his main business can deliver, then I think, Tesla's stock price definitely won't be left behind, and it won't be quiet either. Also, regarding the shareholders meeting, everyone should pay attention to November 6th. If, on November 6th, the shareholders meeting really approves this $1 trillion compensation package, that will definitely be a big plus for Musk. If Musk continues to stay on, of course that will also be a positive for Tesla's stock price and its development, since he's such an important and central figure. Whether it's Tesla's cars, robots, SpaceX, or FSD, he plays a huge, crucial role in all of them. Yeah, he's really the key figure. So, regarding Tesla's stock price, after it went up by 4.3% yesterday and consolidated a bit, honestly, it still has a chance to reach new highs. Just wanted to share that with everyone. Fundamentals are important. Tesla needs to focus on its core business. As mentioned yesterday, its performance in Europe this September was good, there was growth. What happened? Tesla took the top spot for car sales in Europe in September. July and August saw declines, but in September, things picked up again because they refocused on their main business. For this triangle consolidation, whether you call it an ascending flag or triangle, know how to calculate it. I won't cover logarithmic calculations today. For this triangle, know how to calculate it. The high is 367, the low is 214, breakout near $330. So, if you add a 1-to-1 measured move from the breakout point upward, about how high would that go? You all need to know how to calculate this, okay? Sometimes, due to regulations, we can't clearly state certain related professional titles or pressures, but when it comes to technical analysis calculations, you really need to know how to work out these basic Dow theory chart patterns. For example, you need to know how to use triangle consolidations, W patterns, double tops, head and shoulders bottoms and tops, etc. These are useful and often accurate. I've written the price levels above, and you need to know how to do these calculations. There's still a chance to challenge the previous high. But focusing on fundamentals is most important, and everyone should focus on that. Now, moving to Qualcomm. Let me mention MediaTek real quick. MediaTek really can't sit still either. Basically, as long as something is related to AI, as long as it touches on the AI theme, the stock price will go up, no matter what the reason is. It doesn't matter if it's a cat or a dog, whatever the reason, as long as it's connected to AI, that's it. It'll go up, I'll explain more soon. In the US stock market, a stock surged before today's open, related to AI. I wanted to quickly share, if it's tied to AI, it'll go up. Now, Qualcomm, don't forget, it used to make mobile phone chips, like communication and wireless chips. It's connected to this too. For chips and semiconductors in mobile devices, especially attachable or wearable ones, they're among the top experts. But that wasn't really about AI before. Now, what are they doing? They're moving toward AI. They've announced that next year, they'll launch a new AI chip called the AI200. The AI200 is impressive. So how will it be used? It'll be in all kinds of Qualcomm servers and server racks. And next year, they'll be launching a chip called the AI250. Basically, what they want to do is follow AMD's example, releasing a new chip every year. So this year, or maybe next year, it'll be the AI200. So in 2027, it'll be the AI250, and maybe in 2028, it'll be called the AI300. Maybe it'll just keep going on and on like that. As for this, of course, moving into the AI field gives them a new angle, because they used to be really strong in mobile phones, but now they want to move into AI. They want to grab some market share and carve out a piece of the big pie in AI. So, the development of this new AI chip. Whether its performance is good or whether it will sell well, we still don't know yet. But the first customer has already emerged, and that customer is Saudi Arabia, or Saudi for short. Saudi Arabia's AI company, this startup, is called Human. You really need to remember this company, Human. Make sure you remember it, because earlier this year, around mid-year, I don't know if you recall, Trump went to the Middle East to visit 3 major countries to discuss business, trade, and AI cooperation. At that time, he brought along the CEO of Boeing, Nvidia's Jensen Huang, and even OpenAI's Sam Altman. They all went together to the Middle East to talk business. Right? So when they're doing business, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, or any of those countries, no matter which country it is, their discussions always involve something related to AI, like collaborating with Saudi Arabia's AI companies. A few companies were mentioned, and one of them is Human. So this is something you should pay close attention to. Because Saudi Arabia, well, it's actually a major oil-producing country, but it's really impressive. Now, 50%. More than half of its economy is no longer related to oil. In fact, over 51% is unrelated to oil. That means about 50% of the country's economy still relies on oil, but gradually, the other 50% is not dependent on oil anymore. So what is it relying on? They're developing based on things besides oil, which is impressive. Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries aren't short on money, since they're oil producers, so their wealth keeps coming in. Everyone knows this from those videos, right? When their police cars go out, they drive Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and more. Even the police cars are all top-notch, so when they're chasing suspects, they're really fast. So, they're definitely not short on money. But one day, their oil might run out, or because of environmental issues or the development of other industries, maybe the demand for oil won't be as strong and booming as it used to be. So gradually, they all start to look for areas to develop that aren't related to oil. Especially AI, which is an industry that Middle Eastern countries are now working hard and actively developing. Since they're so committed to developing it, who will they work with? They'll work with American companies. When American companies collaborate, every purchase is in the millions of chips, millions and millions, billions, and even tens of billions of dollars are spent. Who are they buying from and working with? NVIDIA, and who else? AMD. And now, who else? Qualcomm. So as long as there's even a slight connection to the Middle East, it means there's at least some level of demand you don't need to worry about, because the Middle East really lacks this. They keep buying AI chips. So remember, companies like Boeing, AMD, Qualcomm, these might all have some involvement. They could benefit either directly or indirectly. This includes companies related to, for example, CSP operators like Microsoft, Meta, and even Oracle. There are all kinds of partnership plans. You can keep an eye on these developments going forward. It's just that, in the short term, it has enough buzz and is a hot topic, but there are still significant challenges ahead. In other words, even if they launch the AI 200 or AI 250, will that immediately knock out AMD or NVIDIA? No, it won't. Alright, so their market share is still extremely high. We can only say that they might want to get a foot in the door and grab a bit of the market, but whether that will lead to a big jump in revenue is something we can't see right now. We just can't see it at the moment, because they won't be launching the AI 200 chip until 2026. As for this chip, what does it look like? How does it perform? How powerful is it? Right now, nobody knows. Not you, not me, not anyone but Qualcomm. Has Qualcomm said anything? No. So, we know nothing about this AI 200. What are the differences? Moving forward, our observation is that this topic is getting a lot of attention. Because of the buzz, Qualcomm's stock jumped 11% yesterday. It actually went up more. At one point, it surged over 20%, reaching above $200 at its peak. Later, by the close, gains pulled back, ending at $187. In the short term, as long as this month's moving average holds the neckline, there's no need to worry. If the neckline or monthly moving average is maintained, after some consolidation and fluctuation, there should still be a chance. It's just that. The most important thing is, after Qualcomm develops this AI to 200 or 250, what exactly is it going to do next? That's something to really think about. So don't just look at it and say, wow, it got orders from Huawei, and then speculate about its future development, or think that moving from communication chips into AI sounds great. These are just themes, just stories. But whether these themes continue, it's not like just because the stock rose 10% yesterday, or jumped 20% intraday, you can decide it will shine. That's not how it works. So remember, a story is just a story, but whether there's real profit or revenue, that's something you have to keep watching. Right now, there isn't any. So just keep an eye on it. Alright, AMD. As for AMD, let's pay a bit of attention here. The US Department of Energy, back at the end of May, had already worked with NVIDIA and Dell to build a supercomputer. This time, AMD has also received an order from the US Department of Energy, and the amount is close to $1 billion. It's not a lot, over 11 years, honestly, it's not much, but it's still considered a medium-sized order, $1 billion. So, the plan is to help the US Department of Energy build 2 supercomputers. As for these 2 computers, the first one is expected to be up and running within about 6 months, and this computer is called Lux. It's not the same Lux as the soap or body wash brand. It's different, but the name is the same. Lux. They said they're going to build it using the MI355X. So, what's the name of the second supercomputer? Discovery. Discovery, just like the Discovery Channel. And what chip are they using to build it? The NI430 chip. It's expected to be completed in 2029. Where will it be used? It'll be used in areas like nuclear maintenance, cancer treatment, and also national security, among others. So with these 2 things, you'll notice a really interesting phenomenon. Nowadays, whenever someone asks who they're collaborating with, or which country they're working with, AMD jumps in and follows up really quickly. For example, when NVIDIA is working with Middle Eastern countries, or collaborating with some AI-focused countries in the Middle East. What does AMD do? They work with second-tier companies in the Middle East, so they have partnerships there. Can the US work with Nvidia at the end of May? Now they're working with AMD on supercomputers. Basically, AMD is following Nvidia's moves and keeping up. It's a lot like Qualcomm. Like I just mentioned, Qualcomm is also really focused on building its strength. So with these two stocks, Qualcomm is more about the story or the theme, while AMD, in terms of stock price performance, is actually stronger than Nvidia in the short term. Because the reason I want to remind everyone about this gap up at the end of September or early October is that this gap was really, really significant. The gap on October 3rd happened because of a collaboration with OpenAI. On October 3rd, OpenAI announced that it was going to buy 6 GH100 GPUs. Whose GPUs were they buying? AMD's. They were even considering taking a 10% stake in AMD as a condition. If this deal went through, they would acquire 10% of AMD. So this is pretty interesting, especially since Nvidia has invested in OpenAI, and of course OpenAI would buy Nvidia's chips. With the constant growth in computing power and AI development, Nvidia invested in OpenAI, but then OpenAI turned around and invested in AMD. So, they want benefits from both sides. You can't just rely on one. If you depend on one and it becomes too dominant, OpenAI would be in trouble, only able to buy chips from Nvidia. OpenAI is smart. They work with Nvidia and AMD. They want a stake in both. It's kind of like the concept of the three kingdoms standing in balance. So, AMD's stock price has been pretty strong in the short term, rising by 2.67%. As for yesterday, the stock price continued to climb steadily along the 20-day moving average, so overall, it's still leaning toward a bullish trend. If you already hold some, you can keep holding for now, there's no problem with that. And finally, just to add a quick note about Apple. Apple's stock price was raised to a target of $290 by Xiaomomo and JP Morgan today, mainly because the demand for the iPhone 17 looks pretty good. We saw yesterday that Apple's stock price surged above $268, hitting a new all-time high. And don't forget, Apple's market cap and its weighting are both very high. It's a very important stock. It's a representative stock that supports the rise of the US indices. Sometimes, when the overall market sentiment is taking a break or when many stocks or indices are falling, you'll notice that Apple tends to go up. So, in a way, Apple acts as a stabilizer, kind of like how TSMC does for the Taiwan stock market. Because its weighting is relatively large, whenever the Taiwan market isn't doing well, TSMC will step in to support the market. For the US stock market, when the indices aren't performing well, who do they look to for support? Apple steps in to support the market. So you can pretty much imagine this kind of situation, this kind of feeling. Now, with JP Morgan raising its target price, and considering that the outlook for the iPhone 17 or other new phones and products is still relatively optimistic, Apple still has the momentum to push higher for now, continuously hitting new highs. Quick Apple news update. For the US stock market, let's check pre-market. UPS reported earnings beating expectations, announced today and above forecasts, so the stock surged 13.54% pre-market. PayPal holdings also jumped 12%. This is what I mean when I say that it's not about earnings, but about AI. Why did PayPal jump nearly 13% in pre-market trading? It's because they announced that their PayPal wallet is partnering with OpenAI's ChatGPT. That's it. Just because they're collaborating with AI, the stock went up 13% before the market opened. Also, regional companies in this sector opened up 6% higher in pre-market trading, and global rose by 4%. In addition, United Health also beat earnings expectations, so United Health was up 3.83% in pre-market trading. Other companies like Corning, NXP Semiconductors, and GE Vernova also saw pre-market gains ranging from 1% to 2%. As for the companies that declined, Royal Caribbean Cruises dropped 8% because their earnings report fell short of expectations. Their upward revision wasn't as strong as anticipated. Alexandria Real Estate fell 6%. This other company also dropped 5.89% in pre-market trading. The drop in Royal Caribbean Cruises also had a knock-on effect, causing Norwegian Cruise Line to fall 4% in pre-market trading, and Carnival Corporation also dropped 3.81%. So overall, looking at the US stock market before the opening bell, the companies that are rising are still mainly those with hot topics, like some AI stocks and tech stocks, as well as energy-related concept stocks. Today, UNH surged 3.83% in pre-market trading, which could give strong support to the Dow Jones Index. The Dow rose 0.71% yesterday, staying above monthly and quarterly moving averages. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index was also strong, up 2.7%, hitting new highs. Finally, the Magnificent Seven, everyone should keep an eye on them. As for regional stocks, they jumped 2.6% yesterday, not exactly a huge surge, but a decent medium-sized gain. A 2.6% increase is pretty good, and it also set a new all-time high. This week is very important because 5 of the Magnificent Seven will be releasing their earnings reports, specifically on October 30th and 31st. The 5 giants I just mentioned, Meta, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, will all be announcing their earnings, so everyone needs to pay special attention, because these 5 giants. Once their earnings are out, there's a strong chance, about 80 or 90%, you'll know if the main US indexes, like SOX, Nasdaq, or Magnificent Seven, can keep rising. These companies will play a key role. Overall, I think the US stock market is still showing a bullish trend now. It's just that when it comes to managing positions, everyone is still proceeding cautiously, taking partial profits when prices rise, and if there's a pullback, closing out positions to add more later, basically trading the price swings back and forth. This is a relatively safe approach for the current stage, a safer way to operate. Alright, and of course, don't forget, we'll also be updating you on earnings reports and economic data over the next couple of days. If you have any investment questions, feel free to leave me a comment. That's all for today's group update, bringing you the latest news before the US stock market opens. Before you leave, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Wishing you all successful trades, and see you tomorrow.
Our company has no improper financial interests in the individual securities recommended or analyzed. The information in this program is for reference only. Investors should make independent judgments, evaluate carefully, and bear their own investment risks. If you don't want to miss the latest market updates, be sure to turn on the notification bell and hit subscribe. In addition, we have plenty of great video content on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't miss out. In our group, we share in-depth explanations of global financial events with you every day.